This is Talking Drupal, our weekly chat about web design and development with a group of guys that have at least one thing in common. We love Drupal. We're recording this live on a Wednesday afternoon in Google Hangout. You can visit us at talkingdrupal.com. This is episode 101. It's Wednesday, August 12th, 2015. And today we're going to the movies. Welcome, guys.
Good afternoon.
Hey, good to see everyone.
How's everybody doing today?
Great.
Feel good.
That's
I'm on
good.
vacation.
Yes.
So I'm not going to complain.
Yeah, we have our guest today, Chris Wells, joining us. We'll get to his introduction in a moment, but so we're stretching out to North Carolina today. But visiting us from the OOMF offices in Providence, Rhode Island, we have John Picozzi. Hey, John.
Good afternoon.
What's new, John? Anything?
Not a whole heck of a lot. Just working on some cool projects for some cool clients. Had the Drupal meetup last night, which was actually a Drupal WordPress combined meetup. That was a pretty good time. We got a lot of people in house for that, and yeah, everybody seemed to have a good time. So that was good. No fist fights broke out, so it's always a plus.
No, us Drupal and WordPress people get along very well. You know what? Pizza and beer always helps with that, though. So
Yeah,
we have to thank OOMF for supplying that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's always our pleasure to make those tidings in hopes to avoid fistfights.
Excellent. And so joining us from the luxurious Worcester, Massachusetts, we have Nick Laughlin. Hey, Nick.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I don't know if I would call Worcester luxurious, but I like it.
Yeah, why not? So we get to see you last night in Providence as well.
Yeah, it was a good time. It was very different than the typical Drupal meetup, but it's good to see some of the other side of the coin. You know, there's always a big rivalry between WordPress and Drupal, and we actually have I think we have a podcast on WordPress versus Drupal. I think it was in the first 10 episodes.
It was, you know what? And I think it's our highest viewed and listened podcast.
I'll grab that.
That's definitely the highest viewed on YouTube. So it's kind of interesting. So people are always looking for information when they're trying to choose a product. And we should probably go back, since that was so long ago, and record one of those again. We had Dustin join us that day.
It was episode 16.
16, yeah. We should go back and do another one of those in the near future. That was fun. So joining us today, we also have Chris Wells. He is from Redfin up in Maine. I believe it's Maine, right? It's not New Hampshire. It's Maine.
We were in New Hampshire briefly, but Portland, Maine now.
Okay.
Settled there. Roots are down.
Yeah, so Chris is a graduate from Providence College, right around the corner from me, with a degree in computer science, and he's also has a graduate degree in technology education from Appalachian State University. He started Redfin with his partner Patrick in 2005, so they've been doing that for 10 years. Happy anniversary.
Yeah.
When he's not Drupaling, he's refereeing two toddlers, or he's on vacation like he is right now.
Yes.
He also relieves his stress by playing guitar, as many of us do. So he's also speaking at our upcoming New England Drupal camp in October in Providence. And if you're in the New England area, you will always see him at the Drupal camps. So welcome, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. So it's really great to be here, and thanks for having me. I appreciate the invite.
So,
Yeah,
Chris, I got a question right off the bat. Did you drive or fly to the Carolinas?
We drove. We drove in our
Oh, man.
new minivan. It was luxurious compared to last time we drove down in my Subaru.
Wow. How long of a drive is that?
It's about 15 hours, 16 hours, but we stopped in Pennsylvania, actually right outside Hershey, so the kids had no problem with that.
There you go.
How old are the kids?
3 and 2.
Ah,
They're about 19 months apart, so it's two toddlers at the same time.
Yeah, so we grew, my wife and I, we've always traveled by car up and down the East Coast, and if you start young with your kids, it's never a problem. So our kids, we drive everywhere, and they still, even as late teens still enjoy getting in the car and going for a long trip. It was funny. We flew somewhere a couple of years ago to maybe Ohio or something for a conference we were going to, and we all went as a family. And then when it came time to go to Florida the next summer, we're like, well, how about if this year we fly to Florida? And the kids said, you know what, we'd rather drive. It feels more like a vacation.
Wow.
That's what you can do if you keep them in the car. So
Yeah, all right. I'll look forward to that.
that's advice.
Once the kids stop being lap children, the cost of flying goes up dramatically.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at flights to Florida right now, and my 3-year-old, soon to be 3-year-old, will procure a seat, which is adding expense, definitely.
Sure is.
I'm just not willing to make that drive.
Also, I would be remiss if I wasn't a good Western North Carolinian to say that the school I attended was Appalachian State University.
Okay.
When my wife first got some calls when we were going to grad school here, she kept telling me, "Hey, they say it so weird. I can't even say it." I had to come up with a mnemonic device because we kept saying Appalachian Trail, Appalachian Mountains, Appalachian Mountain Range, but not down here. You live in Appalachia.
So that's the clue that you're from out of town, huh?
That's right. It's like people who say Oregon. No one in Oregon says Oregon.
Exactly. So our show today is, we titled it Going to the Movies. And we've done this in the past. We are going to do it again today, which is we pick a problem we're trying to solve, a site we're trying to build, and it's fictitious. None of us are actually building a movie site right now, although Nick has said that now he's interested in building a movie site based on us preparing for the show. So we're going to talk about building a website for a movie theater with the following sort of criteria: that it's a theater with multiple locations, with multiple screens at each location, and each of those locations could be of different sizes, so different number of screens, that there are new movies coming in each week, that we need the ability to purchase tickets, and the start and the length of the movies, this is kind of obvious, will be variable. So I'm not sure in the 50 minutes we have we can solve this problem completely, because I think there's a lot of nuances in scheduling. So this problem is really kind of interesting because it's kind of a logistics problem in some way. It's also if you're going to sell tickets, there are deluxe theaters or special theaters that have assigned seats, so that could be something we could potentially bring into the problem. But we're trying to narrow it down into one that's a little bit simpler beginning. You probably would need to do a lot more research on this to actually build a site like this, but it's an interesting problem.
Absolutely.
So, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, so I'm excited to talk about it, and the genesis of this is there's a tiny little theater right outside of Worcester that I go to that, they show older movies, so they're out of most other theaters. It's a little bit cheaper, so it's a good time sometimes if you missed a movie, you didn't see the movie in the main theater, you can go there and catch up on it. And their website looks like it's from about 1998 or so. I mean, you have to make the selection whether you're going to you have cable internet or dial-up internet before you go into the website. And every time I use it, I think, man, I should see if they'd like to rebuild the site. It kind of feels like the drive-in when you go to that movie. It's that theater. But the more I think about how you would build a movie site, movie theater site, the more complex the scheduling gets. So I think this should be a good topic.
So when's the last time anyone went to the movies? So I'm guessing, this is just a guess here. Nick doesn't have any kids, so he frequents the movies often, and that Chris and John have young kids, so the last time they saw a movie might have been a long time ago. And for me, my kids are older, so my wife and I, that's one of our pastimes, is to go to movies on a somewhat regular basis, maybe twice a month. So how close am I?
I'm going to surprise you.
Yeah, okay.
I will surprise you.
Go ahead.
For two reasons. We recently went to the drive-in to see movies. There's one in Westbrook and there's one in in either Saco or Scarborough near us. So we have a choice of 2 drive-in venues. So we take the kids and see movies in the car so that it's under control. So that's pleasant. And then my in-laws recently moved up, which means we have people who will watch the kiddos for a brief amount of time. So we actually went out and saw Trainwreck about a week ago, shortly before we came down for vacation. So with those 2 excluded, it may have been about a year, but for whatever reason, we recently hit that.
Yeah, Steve, you pegged it for me. Last time I went to the movies, I don't know, it was to see the new Avengers movie. And the lady at the movie theater was like, "Hey, do you want to sign up for our rewards program? You get all these really great benefits." And I was like, honestly, no, I don't, because this is the first movie I've seen in probably about a year in a movie theater. So I'm not probably going to be much using the rewards program. So yeah, you definitely pegged that.
I mean, the rewards are, a blessing and a curse. They're great because you do get free tickets and free popcorn and items like that sometimes. But you get points and you get to see how much you've actually spent at the movies since you got it. And, we, like you said, I'm married, we have no kids, so we go quite a bit. I mean, there was one period, I think in June or May, where we went to like 4 movies in a week and a half. But, well, not that typical. But we actually have a couple of drive-ins around here too. I think I've never been to the Leicester one, which is about 20 minutes away, but there's one in Mendon. There's a 3-screen in North Smithfield, Rhode Island, I think.
Yeah, right on 146.
And so we go there about once or twice a year.
All right, so we're pretty much, so Nick, just the last question. What's the last movie you saw then? Yeah,
Terminator.
Terminator, okay.
Terminator 3.
And I saw The Gift. I saw The Gift over the weekend, which was a good film.
The Gift.
Terminator had huge plot holes. Like, you need to go forward in time to stop something. Why in the hell do you go 10 minutes before the thing you need to stop? I mean, at least go a month before so you have time to prepare. Oh my God. Anyway.
If you're going to time travel, you need to do better planning, right?
Yeah, I mean, come on. And why do you have to, like, emergency leave right away? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, there's nobody attacking you. Take your time.
Maybe the time travel tickets are at a premium. You get one shot. The closer you go, it's cheaper.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Works like the airline in the opposite way.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the requirements here. So, Nick, I'm going to let you kind of run with the way to attack this here, since it's your model. What do we go after first? So we clearly have an entity called a movie, right?
I think so. So the first thing you need to start figuring out is, displaying the information, I think, while sometimes is more complicated, I think in this case is one of the easier parts. I think one of the more difficult pieces of building a system for managing movies and showtimes is the tools that the administrators will use in order to create the schedule for the coming week. When you start thinking about how they're going to, for example, create next week's schedule, that's when the complexity starts to really come out. Initially, when I was thinking about this, I thought you would just have a movie entity, and then you would have a field on that movie entity called schedule or something similar, and you would just put the showtimes on it. I very quickly realized, though, that the piece of the equation that is most constant, though, is the schedule and the screens, not the movies. So the piece that you need to ensure is correct is that a particular screen has the most efficient schedule for a given period of time, which then lends itself to the time slot being an entity.
So I think I'm going to interject there a little bit. I think you're actually I don't know that you want to go with a time slot as a entity per se. I think you probably off to the races on creating a content type for movie, and then having that kind of be the one-all place for all of the information. As I was sitting here listening to you kind of describe it, a thought came to mind. So let me back up a little bit. We actually built a company I used to work for actually built a website for a small movie theater in Newport, Rhode Island that only had one screen and showed one or two movies. Actually, no, I think it was one movie a week. They just kind of ran it every night, and they had it for that week, and that was it. And to solve that problem, it was really rudimentary. We did use a content type for the movie, and then on that content type, you basically used a date field to schedule out the times for that movie. Maybe they were twice a day, or a matinee on Sundays and a nighttime on Sundays, whatever. And then we used the calendar module as a display method. And we're going to talk about ticket purchasing later on, so I can talk more about that. But as I'm thinking about this and having the multiple screens and the multiple times and whatnot, my thinking is that there could be some method where you could use a field collection to determine, okay, here's the screen that this is going to display on, and here are the times that this movie is going to display on this screen. And you can kind of go through that on your movie content type there, because ideally, even when you get to the ticket sales, if you're going to be using commerce or PayPal or whatever method, we'll again talk about that in a little bit, you're going to need that content type to be able to attach as a product to your commerce sales. So I think going with the movie as your kind of one-stop shop for all this information is definitely the best way to go.
See, I would go ahead, Chris, if you're going to say something.
Yeah, well, I like I can see both approaches, and it smells like fish here, specifically cod, because cod, the conference organizing distribution of Drupal, tries to solve this problem in a way that's similar to Nix, where there's time slot entities where sessions get matched to rooms, matched to time slots, and there's a lot of complexity around that, and therefore a lot of flexibility.
There's a slight difference, though, just interjected with COD. COD is coming at this from a fixed periods of time. I don't think the movies is, so you're trying to slot, you've predefined a schedule that you're fitting things into, and the lengths of all the presentations are 50 minutes or 1 hour.
Right.
The complexity in this is that those are varying lengths, that you have an hour movie and then you have a 2 hour and 20-minute movie.
And I have a question as part of my discovery for this site would be, how much of the business rules is the website trying to solve? Are we trying to find and build the most efficient schedule ourselves, or can we assume that some human is going to determine the schedule and simply needs to enter it?
Well, I think I would think that most theaters would be a combination. So a human would generally specify, generalities, but the system would prevent conflicts. So like you couldn't schedule 2 movies at the exact same time, or you couldn't schedule 2 movies within 10 minutes of each other, for example. But I would think that somebody else is actually generating the schedule.
Yeah, so understanding that we know this movie's going to be at 1:50 and screen 3 in the, Boston location.
Yeah, I feel like that's a very, very human-oriented process, and that there's somebody at the movie theater that's like, okay, here's what's showing at this location for this week, and setting that is definitely a manual process. There are methods or services that you can tie into for scheduling. That was one thing we looked at when we developed our movie site. The client was using some third-party service for kind of like scheduling and distributing the times out to different resources. And integration to that was something that they were interested in. but we didn't. I don't really recall us going down that road because the integration was kind of shoddy. So there are third-party services that handle scheduling as well.
So let's kind of back up for a second, because when you talk about having a content type for the movies, what does that look like? I mean, I think taking the scheduling aspect out of it, I think it needs, obviously the title needs probably some artwork or something. Then you probably need the length of the movie, and some kind of back end, as Chris said, some kind of back end business logic saying if the movie is in less than an hour and a half, the padding needs to be 20 minutes. If it's between an hour and a half and 2 hours, the padding needs to be X. And then you need the rating. So whether it's M or R, whatever, NC-17. I don't know that you need that much else about the movie. There may be other social media stuff or other items, but nothing pertinent to the system. So I think that the next thing is, again, because John had mentioned having some kind of field collection or some kind of paragraph. I think it's interesting because one of the first things you need to do is select which theater locations the movie is available to. And then in a theater location, when you're creating the schedule, you need to determine which particular screens is being selected. So yeah, I also think it's really interesting that Chris brought up the conference organizing distribution, because it's not something that I had thought about, but as soon as you brought it up, it really does match quite well, excepting the piece that Stephen had brought up, in the variable time slots. So if you're looking at creating relationships between theater locations and screens, and then attaching time slots to those screens, what approach would you take?
So far, I love what John has said of using the concept of a field collection, which really is an entity and an entity reference, but with a handy UI to create those things. So I'm feeling like I have a movie entity, but inside that, I'm going to create a showing. So every time that movie is shown, I'm going to pick the set of fields that makes that unique. So it's showing in screen 3 at location A and at 8:50 p.m., but it's going to show at screen 4 in location B, at 9:50 p.m. And since those are each field collection is an entity, we get great hooks to do our custom validation. So when we need to do an entity save for that field collection, or when we save the movie itself, we can run the validators to say this showing doesn't conflict with any other showings given the overlap.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think I would take the opposite approach of this.
So I have one point to expand on that. I'm thinking that movies obviously content type. I think you're probably right with the reference field to another content type for locations. But I'm also thinking that your screens or your rooms that the movies are being shown in could very well be some sort of taxonomy for you. I don't know that. That's the one thing I'm kind of having an issue with. I'm thinking that taxonomy makes the most sense because any given theater or theater company is probably going to have pretty the same basic naming convention for their theaters. So screen 1, screen 2, screen 3, screen A, screen B, screen C, whatever it works out to. And then I think just exactly combining those together in a field collection gives the user the ability to kind of segment that stuff out. Yeah. And then as far as display goes, I mean, honestly, they're going to pick the location before they're going to pick the movie, right? Because they're going to want to see like, oh, this movie theater down the street. So then you're just kind of building views that transverse back to from the what is tagged on the movie to the actual location.
And I think whatever it is that we choose for locations, it does taxonomy or whatever, it does need to be fieldable, because we're going to need to bring in things like capacity. You know, screen 3 in Boston might have 60 seats, but screen 6 in Boston might have 90 seats, and that's going to become important if we start to actually try to sell those seats. So we need inventory.
Sure. And that's why I think it can't be a taxonomy. Go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, I think I would take a completely different approach to this, because I think the movie is just an attribute of what's happening in a schedule. So I really think I would approach this from, I've got a schedule entity, and that because the logic, because we will need some logic in the end to try to prevent people from doing overlaps and stuff, and that really is challenging with like that primary data being in a field collection when the primary thing we're trying to do is manage a static asset, which is a screen number 1, and what's it doing this day from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. So if you think of one node in that entity as being screen 1, which screen is it? Could be a taxonomy, but it's a schedule for screen 1 from 10 to 12 is this movie. So the movies are just an attribute of a period of time that's going to change. It's going to change fluently, but the schedule to me is what the key piece here is. And I would approach this from a scheduling side, where I'm now managing the entity that has a characteristic of where it is, what the time slot is, what is showing there.
So just to be clear, Stephen, you're saying, what is one node? One node is one usage of that location, one showing.
You got it. Yeah, and it has a starting time, an ending time, and what's actually going to be in there.
Yeah, and I agree with that, because you need to have a specific inventory for each individual showing. And the other issue with the field collection is just think about how many show it. Like, you go to the movie once, you never think of it again. But think about it from the theater perspective, like Jurassic World. For example, Jurassic World shows on, say we just have 2 locations and 10 screens at each. It shows on 3 screens at 2 locations, and it shows 5 times a day. You know, that's 5 times 7, 35, times 3, times 2. So that's like 250 showings. So you're going to have 250 field collections on that movie entity, which... I don't know if I have built sites that have 250 field collections, and it is an unmanageable nightmare. And in my case, it's just edited once a year, so it's not a problem.
So I mean, it's pretty fair to say, you know, I think Steven's onto something here, that you could say, instead of it being like a schedule entity sort of thing, you could definitely do like all of that information is really going to be on like a ticket, right? So if you were to say it's like a schedule/ticket content type, you would then attach the product, a commerce product to that in order to be able to sell a ticket for, the XYZ location for Theater 1 that's showing X movie, right? Yep. At this time and place and what, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely bringing together a couple of different pieces of content there. One, movie, location, and then ultimately your time and theater choices.
So
this app is so much like the first website I ever built was it was in 1998 for Sunoco. It was an online app that had, for the bulk transport business, we had like 50 bays that trucks could come in and pick up bulk goods, and the job was, this website's job was, it was written for a manager of that facility, that they would go in and schedule what time what truck should show up at what bay, and depending on the kind of goods that they were picking up, how long it would take to fill that truck. It's like almost the same problem. A bay is a screen, the truck coming in with the goods is the movie, and it was the guy's job to go in and schedule all that stuff. And
right.
this is this is a logistics problem, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think we're onto something starting from the showing piece.
Yep.
So we have you create a new showing, you choose the location, you choose the screen, you choose the movie, you choose the time. I think in order to make it easier for our users, we have like, some kind of submit button that says add another of the same type. So we'll add it'll pre-fill, the movie, it'll pre-fill the screen, the location. You can just change the time, or you can change the screen if it's a new screen. Just to make it easier, so they can add it once and then add the next time slot, add the next time slot.
Yeah, so Node Clone will do that for you. I mean, you can clone it and just change the time.
Absolutely. I think another thing that we would have to do, we would have to go back to the movie entity, and we'd have to add another field, which is availability.
Availability, and we'll talk more about what Nick means about availability in just a moment.
And now to our sponsor.
Yeah, the real question is, do you think he realizes he froze? Anyway.
I hope it's a technological problem and he's not actually locked up physically over there.
That would be.
Camera's working fine.
That would be really awkward. Nick, blink twice if you can hear us.
It's interesting, the availability concept, and why that would be necessarily on the movie entity. I also kind of want to just do away with movie entities. I think there's already a database of movies out there in the world called IMDb. Let's just keep it simple. Let's reference some IMDb info and pull it in over their API.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things on our list here is, after we sort of solve this problem, is what other of these pieces have other people already solved for us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most of that content is probably available somewhere else, other than the pieces that are specific for our particular theaters. And Nick is still gone, huh?
Yeah, so I think that's actually really interesting, Chris, because IMDb definitely has a ton of information that would be useful for moviegoers. That information being, you can even pull the rating in from there, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But like
rating, artwork, description,
cast of characters, artwork. Yeah, absolutely. So even some sort of reviews from people that have seen it could be useful.
And it goes the other way too, because IMDb does have theater and showtimes, so it's the push back to IMDb, however that works, is to let them know that your theater exists and when you're going to be showing that particular movie.
The interesting thing there is, and this is kind of what I was talking about with the third party service. I'm wondering if IMDb is curated by pretty much anybody, right? So there could be an issue there where the information you're getting from IMDb isn't 100%, 100% accurate, or could be potentially falsified in some way. So I'm wondering, as opposed to IMDb, I'm sure movie theaters are paying, for some sort of company to handle, different types of scheduling and getting movies in and that sort of thing. So I'm sure that probably has an API to it as well.
I love APIs, and I hate duplicating data, so I think there's something out there for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Whatever makes it easy on the end user and the admin, I think, are both pluses in my book.
Yeah. And I like this idea with the admin, because that's what we can't forget, is there's a lot of these potentially, if this is a pretty sizable movie theater, so we really need to think about how can we ease that burden, even if it's a bulk import or a feeds import or something, depending on, what works on their side for them.
Yeah, that's something that we always try to when building sites. We always try to think of the admin as well as the end user. Obviously, people are going to come to the site looking for movies. How are they going to do that? But also, the admin has to enter all this information. Now, are they entering it into one system that they use for all of their movie theaters, and that's being pulled in via an API, or are they doing it directly to the site? The site that I talked about earlier. Again, was a smaller movie theater, one screen, one movie showing. So basically, we were building a system that they would use internally as well as as well as for their customers to buy tickets and whatnot. So it kind of covered all of those bases. But I can definitely see where you're running more mainstream movies that an API is the way to go there.
Hey Nick, before you dropped off, you were saying available. You were talking about something being available.
Yeah, so we'll need to add a tracking mechanism to the movie content type to see when they're available. Because you think a movie theater in a year shows 200, 300, 400 movies. If somebody adding a showing has to scroll through 300 movies every time they're trying to add one, it again becomes very unmanageable very quickly. So adding some sort of logic to allow, when you're selecting which movie for the showing, only show the currently available movies, or maybe the next 6 weeks or so, if they're planning in advance.
So you can actually do that with entity reference already by just you could use a combination of scheduler and entity reference, unpublish the movies that have already been shown and are not being aren't current anymore, and then use entity view to basically show a list of published movies.
And even an autocomplete widget is good for that. So you kind of start typing Jurassic, and you'll end up with Jurassic Park, Jurassic World, and you've only got 2 at that point. So.
Yep.
So in our world here, where we're not connecting to APIs and stuff yet, how do we handle the movie that's available in 3D and non-3D? So are those 2 movie entities, or are they a single movie entity with some characteristic that we have to deal with?
I mean, I think probably the easiest way is just a new entity, because now you don't have just 3D and non-3D. You also have X plus, like super sound 4D
IMAX
version,
yeah.
IMAX,
3D IMAX.
Yeah. Those are characteristics of the screen, I believe, right? Of the theater that it's in as well.
Interesting. Except
right?
They might have different lengths, because sometimes they're
right.
They have special.
I mean, it's also movie format though, because I mean, you can't show an IMAX movie on a regular,
Right.
So my inclination would be one of 2 things: either it's an attribute on the movie itself, or it's a completely separate movie, which seems like an admin nightmare to me.
And someone who knows the movie business is pulling their hair out right now, because they probably know what all the issues are, and we're just scratching the surface, right?
Yeah, I think so. I'd be interested in hearing somebody who's in the business, or projector manager.
So if you work at a movie theater, or want to chime in on this, feel free to email talkingdrupal@gmail.com.
Good. My intern didn't want to go back to the movie theater this summer, and that's how he ended up working for us, because he's been working at the movie theater for 4 years.
So he's now our local expert.
Yeah, we don't want any common employees. We're talking like management level. We want to hear from the people that are actually entering the movies.
That would have been this year, but he took a job with us instead, which is a big bonus on this side. It makes me wonder if there are attributes on the showing as well. So you're entering the showing. This particular showing is 3D and IMAX because it's in this location, rather than it on the movie.
Well, I think it would be on the screen. So when you create the screen, you say which, like I'm creating screen 1. You choose which location it's at, and then you choose what capabilities there are.
Yeah, because that's not changing.
You mean on the schedule?
Not be an IMAX.
You
No.
mean the schedule?
Nope, on the screen. So
when we create the showing,
maybe I'm speaking ahead a little bit, but I would think that you would have an entity for the movie, for the location, for each screen at a location, and then
I don't know about that.
showing.
The showing.
Then the showing is the guy putting all these things together.
Yeah, the showing is what holds the tickets. Like it holds the inventory for the tickets, and the showing is what goes on the schedule.
I don't know about that. I don't know about the screen though, because I mean, ultimately, hardware in a movie theater could be swapped out, right?
How much? Like, yeah, you can add 20 seats to it, but
No, I don't mean seat wise. I mean like are there different projectors for IMAX versus a 3D, or is it all the same projector and the recording is recorded in a different way? So like I could say, I mean I guess this is our own ineptitude in the movie industry, but could I say, oh well, any theater can show this IMAX or this 3D movie. Granted, the IMAX is more about screen size, I guess, but the 3D is really probably, in my opinion, mostly how it's recorded, not so much what it's being displayed on. So I'm wondering, does that make more sense to have that associated with the movie and just have your screens be like a normal normal taxonomy, or just a list basically?
Well, every screen at every location is going to be different. Like one, there might be 10 screens. One might be 200 seats. One might be 400 seats. One might be IMAX. I think you're right. The 3D might depend on the projector rather than the room. So you could certainly, I think, 3D versus non-3D, you could probably just have an attribute of the movie. However, IMAXs versus non-IMAX, or X plus versus non-X plus, is certainly about the particular screen you're at. So the screen certainly the screen can't really be, it can be a taxonomy, but I'm really not a fan of using taxonomy where there's fieldable pieces. I know you can field taxonomies, it just feels less clean to me.
Yeah, but I guess my real argument there is, does it really need to be fieldable other than the name of the screen, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. There's lots of attributes. The number of seats is one of them, right?
But that's not, depending on what your ticketing method is, that may not be something that you would want to put on. You would necessarily put there.
Where would you put it?
Well, it's the attribute of the actual physical location. Where else would you put it?
If you're using, so then you'd have to enter it twice if you're using commerce to sell tickets, because ultimately that's going to be how many tickets you can sell for that location.
No, you don't need to enter it. This way you don't have to enter it twice. This way, when you create a showing in a particular screen, you have a rule that says, okay, if it's this screen, then it gets 250 tickets. If it's that screen, it gets 400 tickets. Otherwise, you'd have to enter every single showing. So the screen has attributes like which location it's at. So location 1, screen 1 might have 200 seats. Location 2, screen 1 might have 300 seats. So you certainly need.
It'd be interesting to test that out to see how it would work with inventory control within commerce, because commerce is going to be looking at the physical product, not so much your content type for displaying that product.
And I also think that, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, the selling of the tickets is a completely different beast, and I think outside of the scope of our fictitious world. And just to let everybody know, next week's show we're going to be talking about human cloning.
This is good. Welcome to Talking Drupal, where 4 guys fly blind for an hour trying to steer in the right direction.
So, well, I think you're right, John. That you're right, John. That when you're looking at tickets and products, commerce looks at the individual product, but there's nothing that says that the showing can't be a product that is tying all these pieces together.
Sure, I don't disagree with that. I think that could be a great way to go. Definitely, yeah.
So. Okay, so I think we've started wrangling this in, and this is the funny thing, because I've been thinking about every time I go to this movie theater, I think about how awful their site is, and they need help. And I've been going there for a few years now, and I think we're finally starting to get to where it starts to make sense on how the information is managed. And when I came back on, I did, took a quick break there for a second to reboot my computer. We were starting to talk about some of the admin tools, because this is, as we've been talking about, is fairly complex, and just giving somebody the default node create or product create form, I think will cause a lot of headaches.
Yeah, so I know for our movie theater client, what we ended up doing was building a whole bunch of views, and you're actually using the calendar view for scheduling and giving them the ability to kind of look at a week or a month and say, or even granularity down to a day, even say like, hey, okay, here's what's happening this month. Here are all of the all the different movies that are showing. Granted, their instance was a lot smaller because it was very much like one movie, one theater. But I think the same approach could be taken for a much larger theater where you have filters to filter down to the theater, the actual screening room, if you will, and what movie you're doing. So views could be your best friend in this scenario.
Yeah, I think you just hit the nail on the head. You'd have to have some kind of block on the showing creation form showing the current screen you're on, and the current day that you're on, what that showing looks like, in order to prevent conflicts.
I also think you need tools to do bulk updates so we were talking about this earlier. It might have actually been before the show, where there's a logistics problem here of you need to stagger the start times in a theater with multiple shows to keep the concession lines shorter, right? Because you don't want all the movies starting at the same time because it will take too much time to spend $30 on popcorn and soda. So you want to stagger those start times, so you probably need some tools there that say, hey, take this screen and bump all of these start times by 15 minutes once you've sort of got them lined up, right? Because I want these not to align with these other movies that are going on.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So one final question I have, and this comes in from the admin perspective and collisions of scheduling, too many things in one place. How do you guys envision that validation happening? Is it a module that you're building to validate the information that you're putting in? Is it a rule? Is it just some sort of update to a certain module, or dare I use the word hack to a certain module?
I mean, it's definitely a hook submit or hook validate. You could certainly do it with rules, but I think it would be one of the most painful rules you ever created.
There is entity rules as well, which exposes those particular things to rules in an easier way. That's one of Ted Bowman's that he wrote as a complement to entity forms. So you want to write a custom validator for any type of entity. You can use entity rules and say, when validating, execute this if condition, return true or false.
Okay.
And you can, so it adds a little way to use rules to write validators, which is pretty neat.
Oh, I'll have to check that out. And does it do it across many different entities? Because at this point we've got four levels of entities.
I certainly hope so, because otherwise we're in trouble. But it does, yes. So you can say which type of entity this validation rule should apply to, okay, and what fields to look at, etc. And even custom things like, well, if you pick this for this field, make sure that you entered a positive integer in this field, etc. Stuff like that.
Okay, very cool.
All right, so we kind of went through this stuff quickly, but I think we hit some interesting topics and maybe came up with some solutions. So who's going to sign up to create the movie distribution? Anyone?
Sounds like Nick has a practical use case for that right down the street. So
yeah, I'm gonna have to reach out to them.
Yeah, Nick. I think Nick was saying something about I need to do more pro bono work. I just not doing enough, something like that. So
right.
That was before the show.
Nick would probably do it for free movie tickets, seeing as he has so much time to go to the movies.
Yeah, 4 in a week and a half. I would go ahead and just barter on that one.
Yeah, seriously.
The worst part was half of them were awful, and the other half were some of the best movies. Like one of them was like Jurassic World, and I think the other one was one of those really awful horror movies that came out this summer. So it was a huge distribution of quality. So.
All right, so let's move on to our module of the week. So Chris has recommended
for every website.
A module called Misery. Tell us about Misery, Chris.
Misery is awesome. It sort of, I think, probably half started out as a joke, but actually found its way into the realm of useful. So Misery is a way to tame the trolls or to tame the spammers on your site. And it was actually inspired by a vBulletin similar usage. There's a vBulletin hack called Miserable Users that was the inspiration for Misery. And there's a lot of different options that you can do, and you can even determine how frequently these kinds of miserable things happen to users. So I actually usually used this on a site where we were getting a lot of human spammers. So people that were actually going through the registration process, through the CAPTCHA, through the honeypot, so that they could post about their knockoff Louis Vuitton bags or whatever. So rather than block them and fight that battle, I wanted to let them believe that they were in and they were fine, so that they wouldn't go create new accounts. So you can, for example, white screen the site totally randomly, and by default you can turn it on. 10% of the time it'll white screen the site, and this all happens based on like role, for example. So you give these people a role, and then that role will just white screen 10% of the time, or you can go upwards to 50%. You can redirect to a random URL in a predefined list. Just send them to the wrong place. Give them an access denied on the About page, but only do it like 30% of the time. Make forms, not submit. So they go and they fill out their Louis Vuitton comment, and then this didn't work. You can crash IE6 completely. If they're using IE6, it'll just crash the browser. So, and there's a lot, and they're all optional. Log the user out. Oh, sorry, not logged in anymore. So, really cool, funny, miserable, and quasi-useful.
So I think this is a topic for another show, but it'd be interesting learning how you discovered that they were actual human spammers versus just bots, and that the CAPTCHA just wasn't failing for whatever reason.
But yeah, the short answer is I tried like 10 different approaches to automated spam prevention, and they didn't work. So that's how I shrugged and said, I think it must be this.
Okay.
Well, it's a pretty good sign too if you don't get an email back from somebody that's like, your website sucks, it's really broken, and it logs me out and does all these terrible things.
That's true. I didn't get any of those.
Well, it's reporting 139 installs, so
widely used and adopted.
Wide enough based on the topic of being novelty category. So
yeah.
Well, that's great. Okay, here we are at the end of 101. So first off, Chris, thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. Again, happy to be here.
And breaking up your vacation, so we appreciate that.
This was a great excuse for my wife to take all the kids and go play at a park. So this is the quietest it's been in a while. I'm not complaining.
Until you have to put in your payment later for this hour of peace, right?
I took 4 kids to the park an hour before this, so I think I've prepaid.
Oh, okay, good. You're in a good position. So, Chris, if people are looking to reach out to you or learn more about your company, where should they go?
Yeah, so I'm in the unfortunate place where my name and my handle is super common. So on Drupal.org, I'm C Wells, but on Twitter and on IRC, I'm SCEO is my handle there. So, and if you want to check out our site, which is a classic cobbler's children wear no shoes problem, it's redfinsolutions.com. And you can find us there. We're working on our Drupal 8 site currently, so hopefully we'll have something new launched soon.
All right, thank you. How about you, John?
You can find me on all the major social networks at John Picozzi. And as always, at oomfink.com.
Excellent. And Nick?
You can find me online at nixvan, pretty much everywhere, and online at enlighten.net.
Or your local movie theater in Worcester on a regular basis. You can find Nick. You can find me, Stephen Cross, at Stephen Cross with a PH on Twitter, or on my company website, parallaxinfotech.com. And guys, that's a wrap to 101, and talk to you next week.
Fabulous.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.